What do you need for a viable tourism industry?
An airport.
What else? Yes, sir. Hotels. All right. Keep going.
Cheap labor.
So Hawaii cannot have or New York cannot have a tourism industry.
Not cheap. Labor.
An embassy. So when people come to protect the country.
In the hierarchy of things, most people don't ever use that, but it's good. So then you would need many, many embassies. If Jamaica is establishing a tourism industry, it has to ask all of the countries from where the visitors arrive to establish an embassy so that the individuals from that country can feel protected. It's a stretch, but it's nice to have. Not necessary, but a good thing to have. Especially if you come from a part of the world where you don't feel safe. What about you? What you got?
They need to have some sort of leisure activities.
Leisure activities. For instance.
Maybe some kind of beach.
Okay. Someone else.
Just like some sort of attraction in general.
Places to go, things to do.
It has to be a place that people want to go, right?
Desirability.
Food that your customers want to eat.
Say more. Local food or McDonald's food?
Well, it depends on what your customers want to eat. Are they going to be okay with your consistent diet, or do they want something more like their home-based menu?
I should tell them I'm going deaf. Too much headphone use. So half of what you said, I barely heard. Hopefully everybody heard it, but that's okay.
They might want to have a diverse selection.
Diverse selection. So tell me a story. What was the last place you went international for vacation? Make it up. Where'd you go? Anybody? Aruba. Tell us a story. Tell us what you anticipated, why you went there, and what happened. In 10 seconds.
We went there for the weather. I anticipated it to be somewhat like Mexico, but it's more. It was nicer than Mexico. It was a lot safer, and the food was probably like. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary. You would just find fresh food that was local there.
You said you could open that.
There wasn't food that was extremely out of the ordinary, like that. You might make a face at. It's gross.
Somebody else.
I just have something that they need. So they need like transportation, actual roads, at least in the destination areas.
People. Yes. Some more.
Public safety.
Public safety.
Yeah.
Embassies. So your own local.
Well, I was just saying, like, police.
Yes. So people need to know that when they go there, they will not get robbed, they will not get mugged, they will not get harassed.
Yeah.
That's important. Last call. Who's got what?
Advertising.
I heard it, but I didn't see where it came from. Say it again.
Advertising.
You need advertising. Say more. It's a good point. Say more.
Like, if you got beaches and a hotel, maybe you want to advertising to other parts of the world, maybe other countries.
So I'm going to go back with the Big Rock. What was the Big Rock again? Airport? Airport. And I'm going to tell you a Jamaican story. And I like to use stories of failure. Not because I love failure, but I think you learn more from seeing a problem and asking how could this have been averted. And by seeing a situation that works perfectly where you don't have to think about it. When you're broke, you think about how to save money. When you're doing well, saving is like unbelievable. So let's talk about an airline that they thought they needed to get the people there. Obviously, they could use international carriers like American and others. But Jamaica decided that it needed its own airline. And they established Air Jamaica. I'm teaching an MBA class, and I decided for the first 4 weeks I'll just talk about the airline industry. So this will dovetail into tonight's class. So the government, remember we talked about commanding heights of the economy? And this was out of Karl Marx It's better for the government to control the commanding heights rather than allow few people to get rich. If there's not enough capital and enough local people who can actually afford to be invested in these things, certainly before you have a stock market, then it's best that the government control the commanding heights of the economy, the important sectors. So I'm glad that the tourism thing came up, because how do you get this started? 1961, they became independent. By 69, they decided that they needed their own airline so that they can bring people in. The problem, as I hear the story being told, and you can watch any YouTube video, whether it's true or false, and get a sense of what's going on, is that Jamaicans love their airline more than foreigners love their airline. Obviously, some national pride. Hey, this is our airline, and we'll travel on this. So the airline strategy seemed more oriented in getting Jamaicans from one location to the other, and than bringing the tourists in. That's okay too. If the government is going to subsidize the operation, it's better that it be subsidizing the local people, the same way you would subsidize the bus system or the educational system or the health system. Hey, get our people to where they need to go. Perhaps in hindsight that was a mistake, but you need enough traffic to keep everybody employed. So it seems as though initially the focus of the airline was establishing Jamaican pride. Yes, we bring people in, but we're not as focused on the international customer as much as the Jamaican customer. I'm making up some of this, okay? And I told you that at the beginning. I make up a lot of what I'm saying. You've got to figure out where the truth is. Enough said. The Addington Common Show, starring yours truly. At the end of the day, most government-owned industries get into halt. They fail. Financial disasters. Because civil servants don't know how to manage things. They just move a piece of paper from here to there. Somebody else moves it from here to there. Sign off. That's what they do. They're bureaucrats. They don't think management. But anyway, whether you hire good managers or not, the airline industry in many poor countries that try to establish national carriers usually end up with the government subsidizing them for many, many years. It's a very expensive proposition. In fact, the CEO, one of the former CEOs of American Airlines, told the staff at American Airlines, nice place to work, don't buy the stock. Let the gamblers buy the stock. So we have a poor country and poor people trying to get involved in this thing. It's destined to fail. The good point about it, the same way you would subsidize education or health care, might be a good argument for why you might want to subsidize international travel. In that you want people to be able to get from point A to point B. Getting from point A to point B is important because there's something called externalities. So even if you do something as a subsidized process, the net benefit in the long run will still be positive. For example, every student who goes to Oakland University is subsidized by the state of Michigan if they are a citizen and a resident of Michigan. That's just a fact. All public schools subsidize the education. The easy way to fix that is to think of the private school down the road. In fact, the difference in the price, and if you were to pay the private school price to come here, then you would see that you're being subsidized. Why would the state of Michigan subsidize your education if you're a resident of Michigan? Because it believes that you will give back to the state, that the investment made in you will pay dividends down the road. The same way the K through 12 is subsidized, you don't have to pay as you go. A poor family gets equal access with a rich family in the public school system. And the richer people might move out into the private school system, but that's another story for another time. This subsidy helps to pay for something that will give benefits down the road. It's kind of like, I was thinking of a slogan, pay it forward. Effectively, the government views everyone as being equally entitled to public goods, and therefore you don't get access to the public good based on your ability to pay, but on your need. Kind of a socialist idea, but it works. The idea is that you will benefit down the road, and the benefits down the road will exceed the cost up front, and therefore it will pay off in the long run. So that will be the last chapter we touch on, education and health, at the end of the course. But anyway. So getting a national carrier might be a good thing, because once the people arrive, and you can take them by the ankles and shake them to see what falls into their pockets, you make back in the second part what you lost in the first part. Get them there, and then pick their pockets. When you go to a sporting event, and all the concessions charge oodles of money for things that, could you smuggle them in, you would be happy. You see the same situation here. Get the people in, and then try to see how much you can get out of them. It will pay off in the long run. I think that point is well taken. I can move on. Having a national carrier allows that traffic to occur. Jamaica tried it. Most Caribbean countries that I know of had a national airline. They all ended up being financial disasters. But you just have to accept up front that it's not likely to be profitable. It's basically a way to subsidize another segment of the industry so that that industry's profits can then come back and take care of the bills that this one incurred as debt. So because the idea came up that I didn't mention tourism, I will tell you that most of the hotels are multinational hotels. So you go there and you see hotels that are American chains. The food, you will drive down the street and you will see all American fast food if that's what you want. You will get some local fare that you might not recognize, but that's okay too. But the hotels will charge you an arm and a leg for the food, unless it's all-inclusive, where you pay up front and you just eat till you need to go on a diet idea. You need the infrastructure. The foreigners will be happy to bring the hotels. The foreign airlines will happily come and bring people in too, but you feel as though you lose a sense of control. One good thing about having a national airline is that when you set a price, if they charge a price much higher, you get to bid their price down. This is an important point, even though I'm not saying it like it's important. If the state of Michigan lowers the cost of Oakland University, the private school down the road can't keep its price up there because the demand will increase here. So if they want to compete, they've got to bring their price down. So sometimes you incur a greater loss as a signal to the rest of the private sector of the market that your prices needs to be adjusted. Does that make sense? So you don't actually have to supply anything, just signal a low price. Oakland can say the education is going to be $1 per course from now on. And watch the other schools around like Walsh and Baker and Kettering say, gee, their price is so low we can't compete. Of course, Oakland needs to have the spots to take people. But even if you don't supply the spots, people might say, you know what, we can't compete with that price, so we'll lower our price so that we appear more competitive. It's called signaling. So they had the airlines, and the airlines were running losses. The question is, how long can you sustain that? Eventually, they couldn't sustain it because the country had other problems, and if you add another problem on top of a bucket load of problems, then the question is, how do you get out from under this terrible situation? So I just added that a few minutes ago to tell you that, thanks to Cooper, we have this idea, but I wanted to not focus on the individual hotels, I wanted to focus on something big. So I could have focused on the airports, but that's trickier to manage. You put the airports in place, it's basically now hiring managers to make sure the planes do what they need to do, etc. But an airline, something that could fail, would help you to gel the story a little bit better. So I'll come back to tourism. Again, I'm trying to give you broad strokes on how economies work and what they do to try to succeed and how they have externalities. So this would be a case where having a national carrier will have positive externalities, which means that somebody has to pay for it either via subsidies or taxation down the road so that it can sustain itself. Just accept that. The same way Oakland University is subsidized education, and no one thinks about it as subsidized. When you're paying your school bill, you don't think, oh, this is subsidized. You don't say, thank God it's subsidized. You say, man, I wish I could find somebody to pay. But anyway, that's the point. So I mentioned that for you. You can thank me later or now.
Thank you.
And I hope that as you put together your mosaic, you'll get a better sense as to what's going on. I decided not to give you too much homework because Cooper complained last week. He said he didn't want to spend so many hours on this class. I'll forgive you again. I'm outing you, aren't I? So be careful what you say. All right. So I want to have a short conversation. Tell me things that you said or thought, and I will fix what ails what I gave you, and also fix what ails what you say. So let's have a 20-minute conversation about what you learned this week.
I thought the idea of FTC was like a matter of two perspectives: the Jamaican perspective of improvement, organization, and then like the first world perspective, which was much more. I kind of thought it had a lot of parallels to gentrification, in the way that.
You use a big word there.
Yeah.
Can you use a word that I understand? Write it down.
Discrimination, or you don't understand gentrification. I'm not around.
Not me. I'm talking about the rest of your colleagues who didn't understand it. I got it. I want to make sure that you're talking to them, not to me. Go for it.
Pontiac is a city that suffered from gentrification. People with capital will buy up property within a struggling city, and other entrepreneurs in that city will open up businesses with a small amount of capital, like liquor stores, gun stores, and then the people that lived in the city, that were happy to live in the city, are stuck there because no one wants to move there. It's not a desirable place to live.
Okay, now that you've defined it, get back to Jamaica. Use it in the context of Jamaica.
I thought that FTZ was similar to gentrification because, in a lot of ways, it just put limitations on Jamaican citizens. Like, it got so bad that they wouldn't go and work for the companies that were basically operating under no taxation in Jamaica, and also receiving the benefit of virtually free labor, until the Jamaican citizens decided that they were better off before they had the jobs that were promised to them, or they were replaced by other people that actually were compensated in United States dollars instead of Jamaican dollars.
Someone else.
Then we undermined their dairy market by dumping a bunch of powdered milk in there, and then subsidizing it to save face, because we're like, oh yeah, since you're struggling so much, then you head for basically free, and we'll take that off the table later too after you ate your cows.
Someone else. Nobody wants to go after you, man. You knocked all the pins down. But what do I do? Come on, people. Yes, sir.
I thought it was interesting that I think some American upper management men came in and said that they were surprised that they wanted to put on the garment factory on the garment factory. I think that's like a very hot topic when it comes to inequality at the upper levels of management. And kind of, I don't know how old the video was, but
Too old.
yeah, still.
It's a historical perspective on what was happening. So when Jamaica decided to go for this, remember I said Edward Siaka became the prime minister in 1980, Ronald Reagan became the president in 1981, and that dovetailed, okay, we need some jobs. Thank you for helping us to become the government. Now we need some jobs. And Reagan said, okay, I'll fix it. Ronald Reagan had an economics degree, by the way, so always think like an economist. I made that up. He had an economics degree, but I don't know he was thinking like an economist. He was in his 70s, you know. They say he would fall asleep during meetings. I fall asleep too, so I'm not 70 yet. So the sense was the American managers will come down to meet these Jamaican partners, and you expect to see men as the managers, and they saw women as the managers, and they're like, are you the manager? As though it didn't connect 35, 40 years ago that women could be the leaders of an industry. Of course, it's a small thing compared to the American industry, but still, that's part of the gender focus, yes.
Okay, I just noticed like a little trend. So, you know how like the women, they didn't really have a status if they were poor, so they couldn't really take out loans, or they would have to take it out in their husband's name. But if I can imagine like that the husbands actually didn't really use the money how they wanted to use their money, since it was in their name.
Is this conspiracy theory?
It is, but it's a little bit of proof though, because what was it, Muhammad Yunus?
Yes.
So with the micro lending, once the women actually got the money into their hands, like you notice that the economy got a little bit better. So apparently their husbands weren't letting them use the money.
You're speaking Bangladesh, not Jamaica.
Oh, so okay. So Bangladesh.
Yes.
Well, I was gonna like tie that in with Jamaica and India. So in India, you notice also.
Can you
how,
take
like,
me Jamaica first?
Yes. Okay. So with Jamaica, I noticed how like the men, they had an issue with like the women being in the markets. Like before, it was they were able to just shop how they wanted to, and they didn't like that. They didn't like women having control of owning businesses or having like jobs.
Jamaica?
Yeah. They didn't like when the women had businesses either.
Jamaica?
Yeah.
Have you been to Jamaica?
But it's
You don't mind me doing this, right?
No, I don't.
Trying to encourage the class to get more energy. I can't be the only one supplying energy at 3:25. Somebody else.
Oh, you think we're
Sorry? 3:29.
Oh, you saw the time.
Okay, last call. Who wants to swing and hit a home run? I'll pick on you.
You should. I was really excited for this conversation.
I know you were.
It's very underwhelming.
Yeah.
Gotta be honest.
Come on, people. Okay, go for it. Yes, sir.
I felt like even if American intentions were good, which is it's debatable, I think by the time that it passed through our entire political process, the end result was pretty exploitative of the Jamaican economy. That was the picture that we got from the stuff that I looked at least.
I love how you ended there. Because the camera shows you what the camera wants to show you, and I show you what I want to show you. And you're supposed to say, not hypothesis. Reject. In other words, don't accept it as fact because I show it to you. Verify it. You say, well, yeah, verify it. It looks as though it's factual. Because I could tell you lies every single day, and if I do that, then maybe he's not a garden track, and that's not education. That's brainwashing. So make sure that you are fact checking. So what happened is that what Reagan promised was more than Congress actually delivered. By the time he went to Congress and said, we want to do this, Congress said, no. Because every Congress interferes with his constituency, her constituency. And then the jobs were going to get out of the Carolinas and Georgia and head down to Jamaica. It meant that people in the Georgias and the Carolinas were going to lose their jobs, so Jamaican women, were getting these jobs. And this was during a recession, a worldwide recession. So why would America do this? Have the owners of industry take their wrench, unscrew their machines from in a factory in Georgia, put it on a ship and send it down to Jamaica, bolt it down, and the next day Jamaicans are going to do the jobs that American women did. Why is that a good deal for your constituency if you are a Congress person, a representative? Yes?
That makes production cheaper for businesses.
So the business will make money. What about all these women who lost their jobs in their constituency? You don't care about them? Their votes. One vote per person.
Not when the businesses are lining your pockets.
Okay, so that's the reality. Most people are ignorant of what their congressperson is doing. Now, I ask you the question right now. Who is your representative in Congress? How many people can name their representative? 1, 2, 3.
Commercials.
Okay. All right. So the majority of people can't name their representative, which means that the person that's supposed to be representing you, you have no idea who they are. Ignorance and apathy. Don't know and don't care. Ultimately, the business persons know who the representatives are. Because they're always talk to them. In the old days, they would take them on vacation and take them cruises, and so that they can make sure that they're being represented. Yes, sir.
Is it Melissa Slot kind of represent?
Depends on where you live, right?
Yeah.
Different people live different places. Everybody should raise their hand and name the name because they listen where you live. So the bottom line point is the business persons pay attention to these issues. The average person doesn't. And therefore the business person pays attention to every vote you make as their representative and tries to make sure that they're telling you how to vote. It's called lobbying. We're going to ask you to represent us. And the business persons, when their factories and the machines were unbolted and put on the ship and went to Jamaica, the business person was going to win. So the business person didn't mind doing this. What about the workers? 1 second. There's something in the U.S. international trade-related legislation. And it says this. If you work in a trade-related industry and you lose your job, your government will take care of you until you find a new job. That's American law. If you lose your job in a trade-related industry, the government will help to retrain you for another job. There's money set aside. So when Reagan moved these jobs offshore, that money kicked in for all those workers to be able to be retrained for another job. If you're 55 years old, you probably don't want to be retrained. You want a lump sum of cash so you can sit down and enjoy the rest of your life. If you're 35 years old, then you might say, okay, I'll go back to community college and take a few courses for a different field. And if you're 25 years old, they say you never should have been in this industry in the first place. Because we are always doing a forecast of where the industry is going. That's what economists do. They study every aspect of the economy and ask where are we going. And they can tell which industries are sunset industries. The sun is setting on this industry and it's time to go 99. Sending it offshore is kind of like, what happens to your grandparents? And I'm not trying to be emotional here. At some stage, your parents are going to move your grandparents either into their house or into an assisted living facility. And then into a hospice. Something like that. Okay, enough with the emotion. We move our sunset industries that are the grandparents into hospice in other countries. The industry is dying. There's no real hope for this industry in America because wages are too high, the processes are too labor intensive, the technology is changing. So we tell the owner of the industry, your industry is going to die. So we can help you to move offshore and extend your life a few more years. And if somehow you go to that good weather and you recover, come back on shore and everything is fine and dandy. So the U.S. government allows that. There's a bank called ECN Bank, Export-Import Bank, that facilitates these transactions. So we help the owner of the industry to move, and we help the workers to get retrained. If you are in a trade-related industry, the government has got your back at some level. Now, if you don't want to be trained in the area they want you to be trained in, well, no. And if you're young, they're going to basically encourage you not to get into the industry. And if you get into the industry, they're going to say, you came at your own risk. You came into an industry on which the sun is setting, and we don't want you to do that. So they discourage younger workers from entering those industries. And they'll give you something, some kind of retraining. And that's how it happens. It's kind of like a GI Bill, but not really. If you serve in the military, the government will pay for your education. If you work in a trade-related industry, the government will help you to transition into another industry if the industry is in a sunset phase. So I would say that these people kind of lost, but the loss was not that great. So Jamaica benefited somewhat, and that's the question, did Jamaica benefit? Now in economics we assume that all behavior is rational. So if Hortense is unemployed, and a job comes up in a garment factory, and Hortense takes a job in the garment factory, every economics student will say Hortense made a rational decision that would make her better off. So even how awful we might feel about the fact that she's trained as a nurse and she's working in a garment factory, when the rubber met the road, Hortense made the choice to go and work in that job. In other words, she looked at her eggs that were broken, Humpty Dumpty style, and she said, okay, I've got to pick up the pieces, and she took a job. So we get over the emotion like in 10 seconds. You cry for 10 seconds in economics, and after that you wipe your tears and you move on. Okay, it's like a race. And you can't sit there and say, I lost the race. You've got to get back in there and maneuver on that track to see how far you can go. So somewhere in the context, I don't want you to view what the American president did as a negative thing, because Jamaica didn't have to accept it. They needed the jobs. The agricultural side is tricky because, as I said, agricultural prices are volatile. And the only way to save that is to do what rich countries do. Every rich country protects its farmers. Every rich country protects its farmers. Poor countries don't protect their farmers. They can't afford it because there are too many farmers. So when the rich country farmer sneezes, the poor farmer is catching money in poor country. Yes, sir.
Were the businesses that were moved to Jamaica counted in the United States GDP and GNI numbers or Jamaica?
That's a little beyond where I want to be. I'll answer that privately. So he's asking the question about how we measure GDP and GNP, or GNI. And it's not a question that will come up on the test, but gross domestic product counts what is produced in your country. Gross national income counts what belongs to nationals. So it certainly counted for American owners of the business as part of the gross national product, but it counted for Jamaica as part of its gross domestic product. So that's a win-win. From the American perspective, America was better off. From Jamaica's perspective, Jamaica's better off, but it's apples to oranges, so the question is, what are we doing with that? So it's a trick to use the number that makes your economy look bigger. Because America owns more assets overseas, America uses gross national, and other countries are importing other people's assets, they use gross domestic. So everybody looks bigger than that. The world decided to go to gross domestic just to have a common standard, but America is like dragging its heels on this because it makes America look smaller because of the foreign assets that it owns. At the end of the day, the difference is like a couple of percentage points, so I don't know it matters that much. But if somebody told you, now I'm half an inch shorter than 30-something years ago when I came to America, and I'm just bugged by it, the doctor said you're shrinking. Gravity acts on me every day and it makes me shorter. I don't want to be any shorter than I am now. So I'm saying the U.S. doesn't want to be a smaller economy by switching to gross domestic product. I think you got the point. That horse is dead. Okay. Let's move on. Theoretically, we're in week 3, even though Jamaica is week 2 because it said we're half a session behind, but that's partly because I brought the Gini numbers, that topic from chapter 5, and pulled it forward, so we're going to permanently be stuck straddling the week Thursday, Tuesday, as opposed to Tuesday, Thursday, which is fine because at least we get to start that topic. But I'm going to proceed to the next chapter because you need more theory. The sooner you get this theory, the better. What theory do you actually want? Let's start, in the words of Julie Andrews, at the very beginning, a very good place to start. Walter Rostow, R-O-S-T-O-W. You'll probably get a 2-point question on Rostow, not much. Rostow said that countries go through these 5 stages of development. Rostow's theory is pretty much discredited by now. Walter Rostow was a renowned economic historian who looked at the world and said the countries go through these 5 stages. So I have a video lecture talking about that, and I can pull it up right now. Let me do that to give me at least a chance to think here. And then I will go back to the rest of the lecture. The main part of the lecture is to talk about a one-sector model due to Harrod and Domar. That would be our starting point. Remember how Mahalanobis wrote this equation in India and said, okay, y to the function of k. That is the macroeconomic model. So we come up with a macroeconomic model. And then in the 1950s, a smart young economist from the Caribbean, who won the Nobel Prize, Arthur Lewis, said, let's try 2 sectors. You can treat the economy as a single sector and say what needs to happen for development. Or you can treat it as 2 sectors and talk about how they interplay. It gets more interesting. And now we're talking about Jamaica as 3 sectors. 3 becomes more complex. 2 is enough to get us going. So we talked about rural and urban, and rural would be agriculture, urban would be manufacturing as a simple bifurcation of the economy. Then we're going to start with the one-sector model, which is a macroeconomic model. And then we move into, I don't like to call it microeconomic because it's different parts. So those are the 2 models I'd like to introduce. So I have this video lecture on 2 stages of development. Not stages. Development will not work as a keyword here. How many times is it? 20 times. So hopefully you've watched this. What is development? Let's click on that in a second. Development India. This is Jamaica. Alright, so let's go back to that. Development, where is it, right? What is development?
Not overall development, which includes social, legal, and political. It is not economic independence because trade can be an important engine of growth, and therefore the idea of separating yourself from other countries does not mean that your country will develop. It is not industrialization. Industrialization, meaning the focus on manufacturing rather than agriculture, does not necessarily use your resources in the best possible way. If the rural sector can prosper, it will thereafter afford what the urban sector is producing. This is a consequence of the ordering of needs. The rural sector pretty much takes care of basic needs, and additional income is then allocated to improving the quality of life beyond basic needs. So what is economic development? It is growth plus change in the structure of the economy. Economic development is primarily concerned with producing more of what the society considers important as policy goals. So economic development is a long-run phenomenon. It is about sustained growth with structural change, changing the structure of the economy. There is therefore a vital distinction between initiating development and sustaining development over time. One definition of economic development, the process of improving the quality of life for all. This includes raising living standards, creating conditions conducive to growth of individuals' esteem, and increasing individuals' freedom of choice.
So you're going to start the top paragraph and reading the top paragraph of the sentence. One definition of development.
Development is manifest via increasing per capita income, subject to a decline in the numbers below the absolute poverty line and a reduction in income inequality. The main goal of development can be said then to be an increase in per capita income, with some goals relating to what we call distributive justice, reduction in income inequality, reduction in absolute poverty, offering a minimum level of health, education, and nutrition standards to the population, diversifying the economics of the country so that there is more than one traditional economic structure, having enough diversification so that if bad times hit one industry, the entire economy is not affected, and fair valuation of economic output of various groups, as opposed to exploitative valuation. Most of what we consider to be economic development is post-World War II. And I mentioned that 1947 is when India was split into India and Pakistan. Pakistan was later split into Pakistan and Bangladesh. And many other countries were watching India and the Indian model to figure out what they wanted to do as they decolonize and set their own course, so to speak. What needed to happen was once the countries separated themselves from their colonial powers, they had to set their own course for themselves. It's sort of like becoming 18 and deciding that you're going to be an adult and you will live your life, make your own decisions, make your own mistakes, etc. It's often the case that governments promote economic development for the benefit of a particular class. Prior to World War II, most developing countries, as colonies of the industrialized nations, saw the objectives of the ruling classes in their countries, or the colonizers, being met at the expense of the masses. In the first generation of development, post-World War II to the 1970s, most development programs were evaluated by the amount of attention they gave to economic growth, increase in GDP. However, dissatisfaction with this led to a refocusing of strategy to meet the second generation. Growth was no longer the main objective in the index of development. Most colonial powers were required by the United Nations after World War II to give up their colonies. Thus, governments have had a lot to do to help the economic conditions of their peoples. Governments in many third world countries still have not done much to help the poor. Most have, however, instituted some form of social security, unemployment insurance, progressive taxation, and, to a lesser extent, antitrust legislation. Some have used land reform as the main pillar of social and economic reform. Others have concentrated on freely available education, and still others have focused on political reform. In general, however, development planning came into vogue after World War II, and data collection became important to determine the answers to the questions of poverty and income inequality. The data to date have shown that income inequality has actually increased in some developing countries since they have become independent. Economic growth is predicated on the increase or improvement of capital, labor, and technology. Capital accumulation occurs when resources are saved and invested to obtain greater quantities of goods in the future. This investment may be in physical capital and intermediate infrastructural goods and services. Beyond this, there is also an investment in human capital, education, and training.
involving improvements in the quality and quantity of skilled workers. Capital investments of the various kinds we've talked about enhance labor productivity and lead to improved quality of living. Increases in the labor force, independent of any capital improvements, can also lead to economic growth. Note that this does not generally lead to increase in per capita output, and given the law of diminishing returns, generally results in declining average output. Economic growth via labor force growth can thus be detrimental in the long run. Technological progress. Economic growth via technological progress implies using a given quantity of resources to yield increasing outputs. Technological progress can be labor saving, capital saving, or neutral. Labor saving technological progress releases labor from a production process. Neutral technological process releases both the resources, labor and capital, in similar proportions. Since most of the technological improvements are made by research and development conducted in developed countries, most technological progress is of the labor-saving variety. Technological progress is shown by shifting the production possibility frontier outward to yield more output.
So I'm going to stop here. And hopefully everything that has been said kind of makes sense to you. And hopefully you know where on the handout we were. I apologize for the size of the font here. But if you work on this for your test, you'll be golden. And a couple more things. So a couple of the things that I said in that vignette was that the goal originally was to grow the economy. Countries have become independent. They asked, how do we grow the economy? The equation I have here is a production function. And you've probably seen simpler production functions, but obviously we need to move a little bit beyond the simple. So I say, think of the inputs in a production process. This is a two-dimensional relationship between labor input and output. This shows you that as you increase the labor, you increase the output, but you increase it at a decreasing rate called diminishing returns. Every economic student knows that, diminishing returns. If that is the case, then when you try to measure the amount of output per person, you can see that that's going to be going down. In other words, a nice trick that you may remember, depending on who taught you, the rate from the origin to any point on the curve is the rise and run, the Y and L ratio, and if I can make that flatter, every other point we make a flatter curve, you can see that the output per worker keeps decreasing. If you use increased labor to get more output, you're not actually going to necessarily make everybody better off. In order for that to happen, you need, in this function, it needs to be increased at an increasing rate, so that the slope, or the output per worker, is increasing. Otherwise, if you have a process with diminishing returns, adding more labor is going to increase the output, but it won't increase the amount that each worker is getting. And this will become important in our second model. So that's the simplest idea. I will tell you, though, that in many developing countries, labor is the abundant resource, not the scarce resource. What do I mean by that? That I can add more labor and get no more output. Imagine then that I have 10 computers and 20 students. I bring more students in, can't get any more work done because 10 people have already claimed the 10 computers. So adding more labor does not increase the output. In order to relax the binding constraint, I need to bring more computers in. That will give us more output. In the developing countries, because they were starting from behind, the scarce resource we will take as capital. Capital is the binding constraint. And if you can add more capital, then the workers will get jobs. Hortense will find a job if you have more jobs for nurses. But if you train more people in nursing and don't have any more jobs, you're just wasting time. So you need to find the binding constraint and relax the binding constraint. In most developing countries, we'll say that capital is the binding constraint. What they also did was they took the unskilled labor and retrained it so she became skilled labor. Human capital, H is my human capital variable here. So transforming your unskilled labor into skilled labor is not going to help the economy unless there are jobs for people with that skill. Well, duh. So they're doing the right things, but when the rubber meets the road, they need to make sure that there's a job for that individual. So the binding constraint is capital. The first focus in development after World War II was how do you get more capital in the country? That's our starting point. How do you define capital? Capital is this nebulous concept in economics. It's very, very hard to define capital. And I may have said this before. This is capital because it helps me to see better. And this is capital because it saves all the writing implements ink so I can use it multiple times. So this is capital and this is capital. More capital should make the process work better. If you just think of it as simple machines, use the analogy I just used, if there are 20 people and 10 computers, you need 10 more computers. Or at least another computer. Every additional computer will increase the productivity, but additional workers will not increase the productivity. How do you get more capital? The thinking, according to Mahalanobis and other people who were doing this thinking in the 1940s when India became independent, is that if the country saves more, it will take the saving and transform it into capital. That's a simple enough idea. Savings equal investment. If you took macroeconomics and you saw that S equals I equation, saving equal investment. So any more saving would then be transformed into investment. You can either think of the investment as a process where people somehow take the resources and then transform them into another machine. But the easiest way for you to do that in this class is to say, we have the saving, we go internationally, we buy the machine. It's a quick process. Buy the machine internationally. You save more, you buy the things you want. How do you get poor people to save? In a subsistence economy, there's no saving. People are living hand to mouth. Go back to rural India. There's no saving. There's borrowing, but there's not any real saving. So if you can find a way to save, then you can buy more machines, and therefore you can make that process go faster. Enter government. And let's go with a small economy like Jamaica because it would be easier to wrap our mind around this idea. So the Jamaican economy, the Jamaican government decides, we want to develop our economy. We want to provide more jobs. We want to grow the economy. So let us borrow some money and buy some airplanes and bring people to Jamaica so that now our individuals don't have to work in agriculture or in garment industry. They can work in hotels as whatever you want them to be. Tourism is not exactly the most glamorous industry to work in. It pays well in terms of helping the economy to grow, but it doesn't pay the individuals well because most of the profits, just like the FTZ, it's just another form of FTZ. The resources, so most of the hotels in Jamaica, the food is imported from America. They're not using Jamaican food, they're importing the food, or the raw materials for the food. The managers come in from America because you don't want to hire a local who doesn't know the process very well. You're looking at someone in the process and saying, we're going to send you on an international assignment so you can be better trained, so you can manage more territory in America. So many of the top managers are foreigners. Either the country has to find a way to keep these foreign managers out, but if you keep the foreign managers out, you keep the capital out, so you have to accept that as a nice foreign investment injection. Either you can save and purchase the resources, like the Air Jamaica planes, or you can decide that you're going to let foreigners do the investment. So American Airlines and Hilton Hotel and Sheraton, etc. come and they develop the land and provide the infrastructure for you. At the end of the talk, I will probably say that allowing the foreigners, even if it sounds wrong, allowing the foreigners to do it would actually be better for your economy than trying to do it yourself. Because they have the expertise. They hit the ground running. They know how to run the airlines. They know how to manage the hotels. They come with a stock of knowledge that they can hit the ground and make it work tomorrow. Remember Hortense? She said she had to go to school to learn how to make a dress. Whereas the people in the Carolinas and Georgia knew how to make dresses. So having them come in and make the dresses, I tell you, here's what you do. Specialize in one function. Gets more dresses produced. Hortense is still unskilled in terms of making the dress, but there's more dresses being made. And at the end of the day, what does the government need? They need to know that more dresses are being made. that the hortense is trained to make a dress. So having the foreigners come in helps your capital stock to grow faster than if you try to save so that you could purchase these machines and increase your capital stock. I hope that makes sense. I guess I'm saying that if you borrow, whether you borrow to do it yourself or you borrow somebody else's skill set, they will help you to grow faster. Very few people save the money to build a house nowadays or to buy a car. Most people just get a loan, so they enjoy the car or the house now and eventually pay it off. Yes, sir.
When you're bringing in foreigners to kind of do the work for you, are you kind of, in a way, sacrificing your own human capital of your country? Because that, essentially, it would be a learning process for them, and then if they're self-sustaining, they can build their own hotels. Long term, they'd be better off, but it'd be very bumpy for them.
So I want to answer by way of anecdote. We had a senior vice president at Oakland University who thought that the top management positions in the university should go to people who were here for a long time. So he would look at senior faculty and said, we need a new vice president. Will you come into this job? And the person would get in there and bungle their way around. We could advertise on the international market for senior vice presidents, hire somebody who will hit the ground running and move Oakland along faster. So his own idea, he was from India, and he believed that senior people should be the managers, not junior people. Not the most skilled person, the most senior person. And that held us back. And you put round pegs, square pegs in round holes, and not a lot got done. I'm answering your question by way of analogy to say that if you're going to try and train the locals, it'll take a while. So if you have the time, sure. If you've closed off your borders and said we don't want any international involvement, we want to learn to do it ourselves, then fine. That process, by the way, when we come to that chapter, is called import substitution industrialization, where you say, I'm going to do it myself, I'm not going to rely on any foreigners to come and do it for us. ISI has been deemed a failure internationally. So that process is good in theory, but in practice, it moves slower. The countries that have grown faster have been the countries that have chosen the alternative, which is called an export promotion strategy rather than import substitution. So import substitution, when we come back to it, is I'm not going to buy a computer and a car from America. Brazil is saying this. I'm going to build a car and build a computer here in Brazil. By the time you learn how to do that, the price is so high because you have to block up all the imports to give your locals a chance to learn how to do this. So they make inferior cars and inferior computers that don't work. And eventually they'll learn. But in the process, like the north going Zax and the south going Zax and Dr. Seuss, the world has gone on and left you behind. So it can work, but it's like buying a bicycle. How far do you live from Oakland? 20 minutes. By car. By bicycle. You have a bicycle instead. Right. No bicycle. Yes, sir.
I was thinking about it more like consulting, where like a foreign country doesn't have to do every ounce of work. Essentially, like we could be the legs of the operation. They could be the brain.
Well, it's a good point because when we get into international banking, we're going to talk about when the IMF comes in to help your economy. They tell you, get out of the driver's seat. We're going to drive your economy for you. And they're telling you exactly what to do until you brought your economy back to where you are. It's kind of like you're in bankruptcy. They're helping you to get back on your legs. So they're doing the driving, but you still want to be seen as the driver. So think of Detroit. Detroit had a mayor, but Detroit was in bankruptcy, so the controller was making the decisions, and the mayor was just looking pretty and all until the city comes out of bankruptcy, and then the mayor can arise to her ascendancy and all that kind of good stuff. So it will work, but it's using your bicycle to come to school rather than a car. And everybody else is using a car. You feel unsafe on the road because everybody's zooming past you. Yes, sir.
We just discussed it. I wanted to know what some of the causes for ISI being deemed a failure was. But
so that's 3 weeks away. I brought it up because I wanted to give an analogy, but we're not ready for that yet. So we're basically talking about how to grow the economy, and we're saying more labor is not going to help because you have too much unemployed labor right now. So getting more unemployed labor is like a waste of resources. And certainly moving that unemployed labor into hospital, into nursing school to learn how to be nurses, it's not going to happen. You need to planning to make sure that you're doing the right thing. And somehow, capitalism has a way of working this thing out. It will send you signals. Don't invest in this because there's no job. But if the government is planning the economy and saying, okay, we're going to get all these people into nursing school, without thinking will they have jobs, and okay, we just wasted all that money. Think about your major. Rather than getting out of school with this major and no job, think about what you're going to be doing. So the investments that the government was making was good for the individuals to feel a sense of personal fulfillment, but it doesn't help the economy the way the resources could have helped the economy. One point before you take your comment. So the thinking in the 1940s and 1950s was all of these. So imagine a world going from 50 countries to 200 countries. Okay, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but more countries becoming independent. And everybody's looking at India and saying, gee, what is India doing? How is India handling this? We're going to see if we want to do what India did, or what Pakistan did, or what Indonesia did. Then we're going to customize the model so that we can make it work for us. And again, socialism was in vogue because Europe, Northern Europe, was pretty much all welfare states. Socialism almost. And they thought that that way you wouldn't have the poor falling deeper and deeper into the crevices, but at least you would have some minimum, safety net. You have a safety net so people don't fall further down, because in those countries there's more inequality than in Northern Europe. Northern Europe is blue in our map, partly by design, and these countries are thinking, we are blue and poor, how do we avoid going to red as we grow? Are you with me in that analogy? We're going to go to red. So I see 1, 2, 3.
What does the EP stand for?
I'm sorry?
What does the EP stand for again?
So let's postpone that for 3 weeks. Export promotion. I was basically trying to say that this will not come up for a long time, okay? So just erase it and pretend it wasn't there. All right. I think you have a... Yes, sir.
Oh, I was number 3.
Yes. Number 2's out.
All right. Hypothetically, if the income equality was as big of a concern as I think it's made out to be by policymakers, especially in the United States, then why wouldn't we use a production function that did continuously increase labor, even though it was completely inefficient? Because it would be like you would have a mass number of people making the same amount of money, relatively speaking, to comparison of today's terms, and
I don't have an answer.
all you would sacrifice is the efficiency.
I'm going to short circuit and say I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer right now. What I would say is that where we're going is, so you know that if I say y is a function of L and K, and I show you y against L, I'm only telling you part of the story. It's a three-dimensional function, so you need to draw in 3 dimensions. And it's going to be like that.
Backwards K, though, that's extra credit there.
And what we're going to get, take you back to a class that you hopefully loved, if there's such a thing, is if you look from on high, what you see is these rings. These are called isoquants. Iso means same quantity. And an isoquant basically says, what quantity of output are you getting? Output is measured in vertical. When you use this amount of labor, this amount of capital. And if you use more labor and more capital, you should get more output. So the isoquant is, so this might be an output level of 10, output level of 20, output level of 30. As you use more labor and more capital, you're getting more output. It's a three-dimensional model because it's a three-dimensional function. I'm trying to get you not to think 2 dimensions because right now labor is going nowhere. So now that you view the world as a three-dimensional world, you know that if you get more capital, you'll get more output. And in fact, what it should do, try this on for size people. Can I call you? That's what the production function looks like with labor. After a certain process. You add more labor, you get more output. Because labor is not what you need, capital is what you need. So if
That's what you need if you're hung up on equality. Because if you...
So you're going to have to let me finish and then talk after I'm done, okay? Because they pay me a little bit of money to do this.
Sorry about that.
All right. So if capital is the constraining variable, then that is where you get the output. So you can't focus on the labor dimension, you have to focus on the capital dimension. Get more capital, you get more output. But the capital brings the labor along. Remember I said if you have 10 computers and 20 people, every time you get another computer, another worker gets employed. So the labor is going to increase concomitant with having more capital because capital is the short end of your production process. So we end up with what is called a Leontief, and you need to remember this guy, production function, or a Leontief production process, where we say that you need more of both inputs in order to get more output. So the simple example is one computer per worker. We have a surplus of workers. And as you increase the amount of computers, you get more output. If you increase the number of workers, you don't get more output. Leontief basically, so Leontief isoquant would look like this. This is capital labor, and hopefully you've seen these before. Sorry about that. I'm going to draw two of these. Capital labor. And the isoquant I have in my panel above, one second. The isoquant I have up here looks like that. Okay? They're smooth isoquants, and basically what they say, this is important, people. Capital level 0, labor level 0. Capital level 1, labor level 1. Output, let me call that 10. What that says is that I can substitute from this production process using twice as much capital per unit labor to a process that uses the same amount of capital per labor and get the same output level. It's called substitutability. Okay? I'm saying that there are many possible techniques, and all these techniques produce the same output. Hopefully you remember that from your principles of microeconomics class. Smooth isoquants, which basically say you can substitute from one technique to another. What I will say then is, by way of analogy, is that this might be the process used in the USA, and this might be the process used in Jamaica or Mexico. So we're producing the same amount of output, but in America there's more capital per worker. In Mexico there's less capital per worker. And then I might even go to India, and put India somewhere down here. So this is on your test. There's different input ratios used in different countries, different techniques, different production techniques used in different countries. And we'll say that the US will use the capital intensive, hopefully that terminology is not new to you, so this will be called capital intensive technique, this will be called a labor intensive technique, because it uses more labor per machine or less capital per labor. Okay? The ratio of capital to labor is very low here. The ratio of capital to labor is very high here. So different countries are using different production processes. Simple example, go back to harvesting some product, agricultural product in India. The technology they use will be different than the technology that's being used in America. In America, we use a combine. One farmer sitting on top of this combine and harvesting all of this fields in one day. In India, you'll have 300 men doing the same work, producing the same product, but one is a very labor-intensive process, the other is a more capital-intensive process. So in the video vignette I showed you, I said that most of the technologies that are developed in rich countries. Rich countries have a large amount of capital, small amount of labor. The ratio of capital to labor is high. So the techniques they're going to produce are going to be techniques that enhance productivity in the rich countries. Very capital-intensive processes. So when you import, and this is a tricky question, when you import a machine from a rich country, it's not going to match your capital labor endowments. It's going to match the rich country's capital labor endowments because the researchers there are producing something for their economy. So you improve your capital stock, but you end up displacing workers because the machine that you bring in is not labor intensive, it's capital intensive. So you say, gee, it's a catch-22. If you want to stay cutting edge, moving forward, use the car rather than the bicycle. The bicycle might be better for your economy than the car in terms of making sure that there's more people being employed, but nobody's doing that. Unless you're doing the research yourself on a labor-intensive process, nobody's doing that. So we end up with a situation where you're kind of moving forward, but you're displacing labor in the process. The new technology will cause you to hire fewer workers rather than more workers. And if you need to get more labor absorbed, then the technologies that you import from abroad aren't going to help you very much. So I said it's best to import the capital, but the capital that you import will be a very rich country bias piece of capital, which will not hire a lot of workers. What you need is a technology that will hire a lot of workers, but that technology is not being developed unless you develop it yourself. So the model we're trying to introduce, the Harrod-Domar model, the first of our development models, says you need more capital. It doesn't ask who's producing the capital. One of the assumptions is that you're producing the capital yourself, in which case you're designing it. I think we had that conversation earlier. You're designing it to fit your needs. But the question is, if you're designing this piece of machinery to fit your needs, well, your needs are going to keep changing, everything is advancing, then are you best off just importing the technology that uses modern processes versus one that uses old-fashioned processes? Because the rich countries have given up on that technology a long time ago. So that takes us back to the vignettes we saw. One of the reasons that the American garment manufacturers were willing to send their machines down to Jamaica, and I say Jamaica, but it was all over the Caribbean. I'm just using Jamaica as a resident country for now. It's because their engineers were thinking of how to build better machines that would do the same job in America, because they wanted to save their industries. The pressure they were facing is from Asia. Asian countries were knocking on the door, I said this before, of America for many years, saying, we can produce all the garments you want. Please let us sell you the garments. The American garment manufacturers are saying, no, we don't want that. We have to give up our industry so that you can sell products to us. We don't want that. So America kept pushing back and saying, no, you can't have access to the American market. So the poor countries were crying foul, saying, we can do what America wants. America doesn't want to let us do it. I say America, but rich countries. Because rich countries protect their farmers, so the poor countries that are producing agricultural products can't sell their agricultural products to the rich countries because the rich countries' farmers are being protected. The poor countries that are moving into manufacturing can't easily sell their manufacturing processes because the sunset industries that know there's no future in their industry here are hanging on for dear life on life support, saying, no, we don't want to give you any space. So the poor countries are saying, we can't trade our way out of our poverty. We would love to. And trade is the faster way. It's proven. Export promotion. It's a faster way to get yourself out of poverty than trying to do it all yourself. Building that house by yourself is slower than borrowing the money and having a builder build a house so you can move in tomorrow and then enjoy the house. We want to grow faster, but doing it on your own is a terribly laborious process. So you need a new engine. Capital is the engine, and that raises interesting questions. Capital that you design, yes. How long will it take you to get that capital up to speed? Or capital that you import, which will hit the ground running, get the job done for you, but displace workers in the process. So it's a catch-22. But capital is the key. And that is the thinking of the 1950s. How do we get more capital? So that's question number one on your test. How do you get more capital? Build it yourself or import it. Building it yourself means it's designed for your use. Importing it means it's designed for somebody else's use, and it will displace workers in the process. But if you displace these workers and they can find a place elsewhere, then you're doing okay. And I think I'm out of time, so we'll pick up on this lecture on Thursday. We will go over the handout I passed out, which includes the Lewis model and the Harrod-Domar model. I'd like for you to watch one of those vignettes before next class. Chapter 3. Chapter 3. Okay. So I'll post the two vignettes for you to watch, and we'll pick up there next time. You have the handouts related to those. I'll see you on Thursday.